All right, y'all. So I'm back with the Jeep. So I just want to make this video and show y'all this motherfucking engineering feat that I got going on right here. So when I cut all of them braces off of the frame right there, the frame was already bent up in the rear section. So I welded it in the front already, but when I cut all of these plates off, that's all of the junk that was welded on there I showed you from the previous video. So once I cut all of that stuff off there, there literally was nothing to this whole section of the frame right here, except for the top piece of metal and probably maybe a ½ inch to an inch of usable metal all the way down. So this section of the frame actually lifted up. So I'm assuming that it probably did that before they welded those plates on, because I was cutting, every time I made a cut, I was watching the frame, and the frame never moved, even after I cut all of the plates out. So I'm assuming that it probably was previously bent, and you know, they just put them plates on there and you know, didn't know it was bent, or you know, really couldn't fix it because it was so bad. But anyway, I cut all of that BS off there. I got this plate welded on there just in the front section. So I had a gap right here. I had a gap about of 1 inch right here between this bottom piece and this inside of the frame. And I don't have any plugs. They sell plugs to go in your floor. It's like a 3.5 inch hole. You got to cut it with the core drill and pull it out. And they make these buckets that go down in there with a chain in them. And they've got another tool that draws the chain up, and it pulls a piece of metal back through that bucket, and it expands it and locks it into the concrete. They're called easy pods. And then they got a little cover to cover it up, and the chain stays down inside of there. So it's like a job like this, instead of me having to use this ratchet strap or whatever, I could have actually just put my jack right here where I needed it, and then hooked, if I had a pod right there, I could have hooked the come along from the chain of the pod to the rear bumper and just come along it down. And this would have been my pivot point right here, and it would have pulled the back of the frame down. Since I don't have any of that, this ratchet strap was my only option. It's not real safe, but at the same time, you got to get the job done. So I just attached it to the front lower control arm point. I ran it up under the jack at the point where this is where I need the frame to bend down. From this point back, I needed the frame to bend down, and I just attached it to the rear bumper back here with the bolt. And I got it to come down. Like I said, it's not safe, it's not ideal, but this is what the hell I had to do to get this thing on there. The other thing I wanted to tell you guys, I had to modify this piece. So this piece is actually made to weld like at the very, very top of this seam up here. I mean, literally, like, you're supposed to probably weld it coming down at an angle like this, because this metal would be all the way to the top of the frame. Well, as you can see, in this area was fine, but up under there, you know, there would have been no way I would have been able to get in there. And the same thing on the back side, there would have been no way I would have been able to get in there and weld that. So what I had to do was cut probably like 1/4 inch, 3/8, you know, off of this whole plate. I did it up here too, just for safe measure, so I can make sure I got a good weld. But I cut that off on both sides, the inside, the outside. I had to trim some off up in here so that would fit in there good. I actually cut this. I probably cut 1/2 inch off of this, because this piece was all the way up into here, and I would have never been able to get in there to get a weld. So now I can get in here and at least get a good weld here, get a good weld all the way around. I can't try to get y'all a picture of the backside, because I had to trim the backside. See, it's really not safe, but I want to show you guys because this is important. So I had to cut it like that up there. You can see I had to round that whole corner off and cut. I probably cut an inch off of back there on that very back side, because it would have been all the way up in that where the body is, and I would have never been able to get up in there. So I just cut it and rounded it off on that corner, instead of that corner being sharp, where I could weld all the way around that corner. Now I trimmed that down so I could weld. I already got this part welded, but I trimmed it down as well. And then I actually had to add a backer plate. So right here you can see 3/16 steel, and I plug welded it. Can't really see the inside. Let me see if I can get y'all a view. It's kind of dark in there. But anyway, I plug welded it all along the top. So this plate actually goes over to about here. And what I needed that for was because there was no metal behind here. So this just comes up like this, and it sits between these two body mount pieces. So there wasn't nothing back there to weld to. It was, you know, that whole section of the frame is completely gone. So I added this 3/16 plate back there. Like I said, I plug welded it all along the top where it was good metal. And then that gave me a backer plate to be able to weld this in and could tie the new replacement piece to the 3/16 piece to the actual body mount. So that tied it all three of those together to give me that strength that I needed. You can see right in there. So you can see that's the new piece. Back there is the backer plate. And then right here is the backer plate and the body mount welded together. So that was just something I had to add in there for that extra meat and to be able to get a good weld. Then I can come back on this side and tie this body mount into this 3/16 plate. But I'm not gonna weld this yet because I don't know exactly how the middle pieces connect into this. So that's just a little tip. But yeah, this is what I had to do. So you can see now, I got that gap closed up. I can weld everything. I got a little gap right here. I think I'm gonna try to get me a C-clamp in there and clamp this together and pull that gap up. That gap's closed up, so now I can go ahead and weld it all the way out. Oh, the last thing, I'm glad I thought about it. Okay, when you do this kit right here, you cut this whole lower control arm mount off of the frame. And this slides up under there like I told you guys. So you're gonna trim the whole lower control arm mount off. You're gonna trim the inner control arm, it's the upper control arm mount, but it's on the inside of the frame. You're gonna cut that off. And you gotta cut the mounting point where your arm mounts to. Your torsion bar, I forget what they're called, but anyway, where that mounts to, you gotta cut all of that off the inside of the frame, grind all of that smooth, because like I said, this is designed only to slip over the frame. Nothing else can be on there. So now, luckily, I have another Jeep up there that I showed you guys in a previous video that Rick is about to wrap. I was able to take the measurements off of that because this was so rusted out anyway, but I had already cut it off and I didn't know my point from there to there. So if I was to just put this anywhere in here and weld it, then my rear end could be off because, you know, your lower control arm is going to bolt from this point to this point, and that's what keeps your rear end, the space of your rear end. So it would have your rear end cocked one way or the other if you don't have that length right. So what I did was I measured from the very center. I measured from the very center of that lower control arm bolt all the way back to the center bolt hole right here. And it was 57¼ inches. That's what I measured on the Jeep up front that's still complete. So I measured center of bolt hole to center of bolt hole on that Jeep up front because the bolts are still in it. So I had to measure from the center of the bolt to the center of the bolt. It was 57¼ So all I did was come back here and transfer that measurement from the center of that bolt to the center of this bolt hole, 57¼ So now I have that measurement, and I know that when I go on to the other side and I weld that side, do the same thing that I'm doing on this side, I know that I want that one to match this one as well. That's gonna keep my rear end perfectly straight in the frame, 57¼ inches. So that's just something to think about when you're doing this. If you ever get involved with one of these jobs, you know, it's a learning experience for me. So we're gonna learn together. I appreciate y'all watching and try to get this welded out before some kind of catastrophe happens.